You're listening to Were You Still Talking? Hey, welcome to another episode of Were You Still Talking? This is Joel Albrecht, and on the Zoom I have Daniel John Carey. He's been an author shepherd, helping writers get their manuscripts ready for publications. He's been a ghost co-author on many nonfiction books by a variety of authors. He has written 2 books recently, Dream Another Dream, Reclaiming and Reimagining Your Life, and Dream Your World, which we're going to talk about also. He is, as well as that, he's also the author of Plant-Based Regenerative Nutrition, How to Prevent and Reverse Common Chronic and Degenerative Illnesses. And I was reading his history, and the reason that he wrote that book, I think, is pretty amazing. He actually sent me so much stuff that I don't even know if I can get into it all in the intro. Daniel, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Welcome in. How are you?
I'm good. Nice being here. I'm getting warmer. It's been cold in here in LA, but we're having a sunny day finally.
So did you actually have any flooding like on your street or did your roof leak or anything like that?
No, but friends of mine had their basement flooded. There's not many houses here. I guess basements aren't that common, but their basement flooded and they didn't know it could flood, but there was so much rain that that's what happened. There's definitely been massive like streets where there's like a foot of water and stuff like that, but nothing that around here that I know of that's considered flooding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I know when it rains in Los Angeles, you get the torrential rains. We'll get that amount of rain in like 2 or 3 weeks that you'll get in a day. So it's pretty nuts.
Yeah, that's been going on since more than ever. Even people I know who've lived here their entire lives, they say they've never experienced it.
Yeah, and that's what all the news media is saying. It's always interesting to hear it from a real person that's actually experiencing it. So how, I know it's probably a long story, but how did you get into to writing? You wrote a book about screenwriting. You have a workshop about screenwriting. How did all that, how did you get into that path of writing?
When I was younger, I was going to well, when I was 19, I started writing a screenplay. I've never seen a screenplay. I never knew what I just never, and I kind of was making up what it would look like, and it was all wrong. But eventually I went to school for journalism and graphic design and other things. And I ended up working in journalism, and I wrote the morning news for KCRW here. It's on the internet. It's one of the largest public radio stations in the US, but it's global because a lot of people from all over the world listen to the music they play.
I miss it terribly. I lived there for 11 years. I should go. I should listen to it online. Yeah.
KCRW.com, and they have the app. I use the app all the time. But then when I was there, I was also started writing again, and I wrote the screenplay, and I started going to a writers group at Universal Studios where we would go on the lot. And it was supposed to be like a writer's workshop, but it was more like you would go and there would be guest speakers like producers and directors and writers and stuff. And so some of the people from that group started a separate actual writer's workshop where we would read each other's work. And I got involved in that and helping to run it. And there was like 20 or 30 people. And I finished a script back then. And then I wrote an article that I submitted to an entertainment magazine that used to be here called Premiere Magazine. It was a national publication, but their office was in West LA. And I submitted to them. And then somehow someone who worked there knew this producer who worked in the same office complex for Sovereign Pictures.
Mm-hmm.
They produced some pretty big films back then. And then that producer called me and asked me if had ever done any script reading and I didn't, but he had me over to his office and he started having me read scripts, and give him, he would ask me what I thought of them. And eventually I had to start like writing down what I thought to submit a document, the coverage it's called, so they could read that. And then I got into reading for a couple other independent producers who would also have me read books that they optioned to see if they, what I thought of those books. And it was interesting that they're just asking my opinion. But I worked at various newspapers and magazines around LA. And I was also started not intern, but I joined Publishers Marketing Association, and I ended up starting to help people write books. And I got involved with helping, well, basically sort of writing their books, but for doctors and nutritionists and people like that, and also recipe books. And while also working at news weeklies, you might remember LA Reader.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I worked
absolutely.
there, and then they got bought out by New Times LA, which is this corporate company out of Arizona, and they went
Mhm.
around buying news weeklies all over the country. So they bought LA Reader, and then I was working for New Times LA. It was very corporate. It was completely different than what it was. But I ended up working for Backstage West, which is the actors publication here that is also no longer, I think they have a website now, but it would come out every week. And did some work for the Hollywood Reporter, and which is owned by the same company. And then I started got involved in more scripts and writing scripts, and also helping people write scripts and polish their scripts back then. And I wasn't in a writing group then, but I wrote this one script, and then it started getting handed around Hollywood by some pretty super famous people. And this one superstar guy was looking at it and considering starring in it. And then this superstar actress found out about it. And so she said she would be in it if he was in it. And then he didn't want to be in it because he didn't want to play another doctor again. And then so she dropped out, and then nothing happened. And then I wrote another script, and then that guy financing, and then that fell apart because the producers started suing each other. Hollywood's crazy like
Oh,
that.
that is just it. Yeah, that's so Hollywood. I don't think people realize how many scripts that happens to, and even big scripts. I mean, there's the big scripts that make it to movies 10 years after they start working on them, and that's why. Those are the reasons. It's not that they're rewriting it over and over. It's that kind of stuff. It's that kind of just crazy shit like that.
Yeah, it could get picked up by like somebody famous wants to star in it, they get attached, and then like the writer who originally wrote it, has under contract to like do one or two rewrites, and then if the producers aren't satisfied, they could bring in another writer. So then they bring in another writer, and then that writer rewrites it to restylize it for some superstar, so that it's like he has his scenes that like he's popular for doing certain types of reactions and stuff, and they rewrite it, and then that star drops out because they have
It's so
a
nuts.
conflict, a scheduling conflict or something, or they figure out a way to get out of it because they no longer want to be in it, or something bigger comes up or something. And then you're left with the script that had been restylized for this one writer. And then after a while, like it's been options. So they have like 2 years to make it, or a year and a half to make it. But if they don't go into production, then the rights go back to the writer, the original writer. And then people don't realize all this goes on. Then that original writer could take the original script, but he doesn't own the material that was rewritten for the star and the producers. So he has his original script again, and then he could try to resell it or try to make it himself or herself, or themself, or whatever you want to say. But yeah, that game goes on. What's that Tom Hanks movie? Run,
Oh,
uh,
Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump.
I heard that was around for like 9 years or longer before it got made. Stuff like that happens. And then, yeah. So I I had that happen to me with that one script, and then there were a couple scripts, and then I didn't write for a while, and I got burnt out. I ended up working on different TV shows and movies and stuff, I got really super busy being a photo double and a stand-in and a hand model. People
Oh,
laugh.
you
It
know,
paid bills.
I laugh, but I'm always very curious about that kind of stuff.
Hand
Like,
models?
yeah, like hand modeling. Did you have to wear gloves like George in the Seinfeld episode?
No,
No,
but
I'm
they're
just kidding. But
but
it sounds kind of interesting. Did you
well,
do like cut-ins for people's hands and stuff in movies?
yeah, a
Or yeah,
lot. And
yeah.
I also did catalog work, and you people laugh, but you can make good money if you have really nice hands. Mine are getting old, so I don't get work anymore. But one person finds out, or this casting director that you're involved with knew that you worked on this commercial and they used your hands or whatever. The first time it happened, I was a friend of mine knew a photographer who was doing the catalog for a car company for like Ford or something, and all their cars, they had to do catalogs back then. And they needed a hand model, and I got called in, and I was impressed by how much money I made. But it's like holding the steering wheel, touching the button, adjusting the mirror, putting the seatbelt in, and they take photos of each one to use and so I did that, and then I just started getting other work, and yeah.
My biggest curiosity is how long does a session like that take when you're doing a hand model session for a car?
The
Is it a
catalog
full day
thing,
shoot or is it
the catalog thing took 2 days
two
because
days?
they had
Uh-huh.
like two or three or four different cars, and then they had
Mhm.
to have photos for each car with each radio and seatbelt, and like opening the trunk and like opening the doorknob, and it has to be lit, and you have to be at a certain angle, and it gets really technical. And then I got called, the same guy who got me that job, um that was I got on Terminator 2, the movie Terminator 2.
I've heard of that.
Yeah,
That's
with Arnold, and they needed a hand double, but I ended up being a photo double and also doing other things on that movie.
So
And
you were a photo double for Arnold?
no, not
You
for
were
Arnold,
I'm
for
just
the other
kidding.
guy. I
Oh,
always
the other guy, now I forget his name. Really good actor though.
I
Yeah.
always forget his
The
name.
T1000.
Yeah, and I've seen
Yeah.
him. He's like, hey, we've talked a few times since then, but um, I always forget his name. I have no idea why. But he's also from Ohio, where I'm from.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
and then, but was doing all that, and then um, eventually I started going to. Oh, I had an arm injury in 2014, and I had already like pulled out my old scripts, and I was rewriting them, and I was writing another script, and got injured on the set of Teen Wolf. I was supposed to play a doctor, and the actress fell, and I caught her really fast, and it snapped the inside of my arm.
Oh
And I
no.
ended up in the hospital,
Oh.
and I had to have my arm put back together. And so I started writing more then, because there was like a year of having to relearn how to use my fingers and my hand and my wrist and my arm, and a lot of pain and dark days. And so when that was going on, I started attending a workshop here in Venice, um, called Beyond Baroque screenwriting workshop. And I was polishing a script then, and they had too many people in the workshop, and they wanted to start another workshop. And I had already like been helping other people write their screenplays, and still like sometimes reading scripts for producers and polishing scripts sometimes, where before for low budget movies, and attending this workshop, and rewriting my old scripts and writing a new script. And then they had so many people that they asked me, some of them asked me, like, I didn't know it was going to be like me to
Yeah.
start this other workshop. But that's how it happened, sort of. And then I found a location, and we started having the other workshop. And my Screenwriting Tribe, I named it. And I kept taking notes. Every workshop, I would take notes about script problems. And I already had my own list that I had been keeping for years. Problems that are in scripts and how to fix them, like a paragraph here of what the problem is, and then a few paragraphs or one paragraph or even a sentence of how to fix the problem. And I made this list, and it got up to like hundreds of pages of how to fix a script. And so I ended up, because I already had been involved in writing a bunch of books for other people.
Hmm.
and helping them write their books. And I stopped doing that, and I started writing my own books. And I wrote the Screenwriting Tribe workshop book, and it came out. And then I started getting messages that it was being used as a textbook in film schools.
Oh, I see. You didn't realize that was, well,
No,
I've gotten your other two books, which we'll talk about, and they're written like textbooks. So this, your writing style kind of, it lends itself to that. It makes sense to me.
maybe because I used
Yeah.
to help doctors write their books, and I spent a lot of time at the UCLA the UCLA Medical Library. And the people who used to work there thought I was a doctor, and I was there all the time, like researching stuff for doctors to make sure their books were correct. And the people who worked there started calling me doctor. Doctor, we're going to close in 10 minutes. We just want to, I'm like, okay.
You
I
just went
didn't
with it. That's
I didn't
okay.
correct
I,
them.
I
It's like
did.
but yeah,
Well,
I wrote the first book, this first version of the screenwriting book, and then when I found out it started being used as a textbook in film schools, I was like, I better rewrite that thing because it wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. So I spent another year just writing it, and I tripled the amount of information, and now it's like, I don't know how many pages, 600 pages. And that came out in 2020, while I was running my workshop, and my workshop grew really quickly. I thought it was going to be like 60 people, but there were 60 people like the first week. And then yeah, it just grew. And now it's been going for almost 7 years, and it's 1,047 people or something like that who are members. But every Sunday we have a workshop in the morning that we started during the pandemic. I took it on the Zoom. Before the pandemic, there were so many people that I would have a Sunday morning workshop and a Sunday evening workshop. Sunday morning was at a bookstore that was closed on Sunday morning, and they let me use the bookshop to run the workshop there. And I paid rent for them. And then at the Sunday evening one was at a coffee house where I rented the back room that they have this performance space behind the coffee house, and I would rent that. And we had the workshop there. And that's where our friend Nick Pemble attended.
oh,
And
nice,
he's an
nice.
actor. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
in Oregon. But then the pandemic happened. I took it on to Zoom, and it kind of died down. A lot of people don't like Zoom, and yeah. And so,
It
but
is. Yeah.
in November, I started the live workshop back up in the morning, where we meet at the coffee house back room in the morning on Sunday, and then Sunday evening it's still on Zoom because there's people now from all over the country, and sometimes people from out of the country who participate. We've had people from India and Australia and Poland and stuff participate on the Zoom workshop. So I do that. And then my screenplays, I keep getting like attention. There's this one script. I wrote a script that I made up about this religious cult. It started out as I wanted to write a script about a bunch of vegan. I'm vegan, but there's
Uh
a lot of very unusual vegans. But
huh. Okay. So it was
yeah,
going to be a vegan cult.
a
It
vegan.
was
No,
going to
it's
be
going to be a soap opera sort of about vegans who follow this charismatic vegan weirdo.
that totally
Um,
sounds like a Netflix show right there. I just have to
but
say.
as I was writing it, it started turning darker and darker, and I switched it to like 1960 and a half abandoned farm town, and it's a religious cult, and the young pregnant, abused wife of the middle-aged preacher who runs the town wants to escape. And so my script, it's called Outside Forces. They're warned about the outside forces that will corrupt their minds. And so that script keeps placing in. It's been like top on the Austin Film Festival screenwriting competition and like several other competitions. And it just got chosen as one of the best unproduced screenplays by writers over 40.
That's an interesting category, but
Yeah,
congratulations.
a few weeks
That's
ago.
awesome. That
And
is awesome.
I thought it
I
would sell or get optioned, and it still
uh-huh.
has. I don't
Still
know.
hasn't. It can
Anyway,
take time. It will. I bet it will. I did have a question about why we're on the screenwriting. Um, do you ever have to tell people, or have you come up with ways to tell people that their script is terrible? Is that
all the
ever?
time.
Oh, yeah. I've read some scripts, so I know this has to come up, but I've never had to tell them.
The thing
Yeah.
about my work, I've been to a lot of other workshops, and I also started going to the years and years and years ago. I was going to the UCLA writing program, screenwriting program, and I dropped out because I didn't feel like I was learning there.
Hmm.
You're surrounded by a bunch of people who've never written a script, and then there wasn't really writing. It was like guest speakers, and we'd sit there in class listening to somebody yap. And didn't, I wanted more of like a hands-on, interactive work like class. And I started going to these Santa Monica College classes, and those were better than I thought than the UCLA classes. And I was going there, and then um, my workshop, and I've been to a bunch of other workshops. What I was saying is that I didn't feel like they were getting the feedback that they should have gotten. Like people were being too nice. Like, oh, your script is great. I'm sitting there going, this isn't great. But I wouldn't say it that way. But I'd be like, go into micro details about like how you could describe something. Like a lot of scripts in the scene description, the first word is a name, like Molly enters her bedroom or something. Or instead of that, you could have the cat hops off the bed as Molly enters the bedroom. So you're kind of directing the camera where you're on the cat and the cat jumps off the bed and then Molly enters.
Right.
But you're not saying the
yeah.
camera moves, pans over to the door, but there's ways so that you're not starting every paragraph of scene description with a person's name.
Oh, I see what you mean. I read one of the earlier Batman scripts because I was working somewhere where someone had it, and I don't remember the details, but it was they had no. It was one of the ones with the early Batman with Michael Keaton. I think it was the second one, and there was no direction. It was like interior day, factory. That was it, and then it went into the scene, and I was just that was really. I think they were leaving it for the director to just here's what it's going to look like or something, because they knew who the director was.
Which version you read? Because if you read screenplays online, people think that's the script. But
no, this was before that. There was no online. Someone handed me the script.
Okay, because it could still be like there's the writer. The script the writer wrote, then there's the script that like the director and the producers and people get involved with, and they make changes to get it ready for production. And then like the scenes are numbered in that script, and they get it ready for scheduling and budgeting. And then there's the shooting script that has all these, like, all the sounds are in uppercase, all the props are in uppercase. There's more detail. There's like camera angles in the production script. And there could be all these other details. There's also like a pre-production script where there's like notes that aren't like scenes that aren't finished all the way. There's all these things you find online. And then there's also, after the movie gets made, there could be a published script, which could be completely different in certain ways than what the writer originally wrote.
Right.
The published script also might be typed up by somebody who doesn't know proper script formatting, and they're just kind of writing it for people who don't know how a script is formatted. They just kind of write it. There's a lot of people now who read published scripts like they read novels. I've met people who like, oh, I read that script. I'm like, oh, are you a screenwriter? No, I just like reading screenplays.
They are kind of interesting because some books read like a screenplay, and some screenplays. I mean, I've read screenplays that read terrible. I haven't read that many screenplays, but I've read a few that when you read them, they were terrible, but they actually made a really good movie out of it somehow.
Well, there should be minimum, like, it shouldn't be novelesque writing in a screenplay. You're not going to go into like the textures of the fabric and tell the history of items. Like you wouldn't, in a screenplay, you wouldn't say like, she chips the kitchen table that her grandmother bought at a garage sale when she was little. All we're seeing is a table.
Right.
We don't know the history of it unless we're going to have scenes showing her grandmother purchasing the table at a swap meet. That's how we would learn the history of it. But in a screenplay and scene description, You don't tell the history of things. You don't go into like exactly how the camera should move, or like um, some people put close up on a drop of blood, but in a spec script, which is a script written on speculation that it's going to sell. That's why it's called a spec script, speculatively written. Um, you don't put like you could say, instead of saying a close up on a drop of blood forms on a fingertip, you could just say a drop of blood forms on a fingertip and falls to the floor. A cat licks it up. So you're kind of like, it's a close up, obviously, on the fingertip. And there's going to have to be special effects there. Falls to the floor, and then a cat, you just see the cat lick it up. You're just going to write what you see. You're not going to say like a drop, there's a scratch on a fingertip and a drop of blood forms, and then the drop of blood falls to the wooden floor, and then the cat thinks it's something else and goes over and sniffs and considers. You just don't get into all that stuff. You just you say what's seen.
Oh yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense to me, because I've read that too. I've had people who were not really screenwriters say, "You want to read my?" I worked in TV animation, and I had no business reading scripts. But in Hollywood, anyone will hand you a script, and I've come across that where the description was like, "You don't decide this stuff anyway. This isn't gonna."
Yeah.
That's
Or
not. Why
there's
did you write that?
you can tell
Yeah.
it's somebody who doesn't know screenwriting if there's in scene description there's stuff like, as Molly sits on the swing thinking about her childhood when she was running through a field of daisies, it's like visually
Right.
all we see is Molly sitting on a swing. We don't know what's going on in her mind unless there's voiceover where somebody's talking about what she's thinking about, or we go and we show the scene of her running through the field of daisies or something. So there's just all these little technicalities when you're writing a screenplay that you want to write it very professionally because, here's the thing that I should mention. I ended up working at MGM United Artists, the studio.
Mm-hmm.
First, a friend of mine worked there, and she's like, "Hey, you want to work here?" And so I was like, "Sure." And I ended up working first in the publicity department, and one of my jobs was helping to arrange the film premieres, and then uh, and also arranged the screenings for the film reviewers. And it was interesting when they showed up. Some of them would show up drunk. Some of them would fall asleep during the screening, and then some would
Oh
leave. But you
no.
still read their review the next day, and it's like that person wasn't even
It,
there the
they
whole
weren't.
time.
Oh,
But they were
geez.
drunk. There was this one guy reviewer for newspapers, and he would famously show up with like two women who, if you had to cast prostitutes, you would probably dress them that way. I don't know if they were prostitutes, but he would show up to the screenings with two women provocatively dressed. Is that
Hmm.
a correct
That
term?
that's a sounds. Who knows? Today, it's probably something wrong with saying that, but I,
Yeah,
I think you could say
but
that. I don't think I would ever know it, if a prostitute showed up somewhere, because I never recognized them driving
no, I mean,
around.
if you saw
Yeah,
these
but
women, it
if.
was just interesting. They dressed very interestingly, but this guy would
Hmm.
show up. And then when I was working at the studio, also, I ended up working in the script department, um, and dealing with their filing system of the scripts. Back then, it was paper scripts. Now it's all electronic. But back then, it was printed scripts, and they had files and files and files of scripts. And there was this one drawer, and it had like 8 scripts about Princess Diana. And I asked my boss, like, why do we own so many scripts about Princess Diana? And they're like, well, we're gonna make this one movie about her, so we purchased the other scripts and took them off the market. But those writers think we're gonna make their script, but they we only optioned their script for a year and a half to take it off the market so nobody else would make it. 'Cause,
Oh, that's terrible. I've kind of heard those stories before of
yeah. And
screenwriters
so,
having their script bought for that reason, and then it kind of gets killed. Yeah.
and they don't know. They're like, oh my God, I optioned my script. And good.
Yeah, they
But
find out after the studio puts out the other movie, and like
yeah, and then
it's
they didn't make the Princess Diana script. So they spent all that. I don't even know how much money they spent on optioning or purchasing all those scripts and never making any of them and developing their Princess Diana script and never making it. But so I saw that angle of the industry, and then I ended up working as one of the assistants to John Calley, the president of United Artists, and that was interesting. He was a super nice guy, really super nice guy. He at one point he ran Paramount or Warner Brothers, one of those, and I think it was Paramount. But I worked for him when he was president of United Artists, and there were tons of he had these long bookshelves on one wall where it was I don't know how many scripts, must have been 1,000 or who knows how many were on these shelves. And he would, at the end of the day, and these scripts were like sent to him by agents and managers and famous people he knew and directors and writers he knew and stuff like that. And also scripts that made it up that were vetted through the studio system. The studio readers read them and then advanced them to his office. And then he would look through several scripts every day, or maybe a dozen or so every day, to see which one he was going to read. And he would flip through them really quickly. And one day I asked him, how do you decide so quickly if you're going to read a script or not? And he showed me, he's like, see these big blocks of text and this rambling scene and this dialogue that goes on forever and ever. So I'm not going to read that. He said, if the screenwriter's not going to spend the time to polish their script, I'm not going to spend the time to read it. And it was
oh,
kind of like,
interesting.
wow,
That's really good for screenwriters to know,
that's how
right?
fast they decide. And
Yeah.
these writers, they got their script into the hands of one of the most powerful people in Hollywood ever, John Calley. You could look him up, Calley. And that's how quickly he was like, nope. And so I saw that going on, and I also dealt with some of the studio readers and people like that. And then that's one way I learned you better sharpen your script
Right.
or you
Right.
submit it.
It's similar. I worked in the mail room at A&M Records, so I went all over the lot as delivering mail. But I found out during my time there that the A&R department, which I don't think they have anymore, but in the old days, record companies had the A&R department, which was the people who decided if they're going to sign an artist or not. And it was the same thing with them. They had boxes and boxes full of, at that time, cassette tapes. Um, and, first thing, if it doesn't sound good right away, they're going to toss it. But they had a 10-second. They gave it 10 seconds. If they got by 10 seconds of the song, the artist, whatever it was, they give it another 10. So you had 10 seconds to for
Yeah.
them to decide if that was going to work or not. And it didn't matter who sent them the material. That's what it was.
That's where I'm at now with screenplays, is because now I've ran something like 450 workshops.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I wrote my book that's used as a textbook in film schools. I've rewritten scripts for producers and stuff like that. Sometimes when you rewrite, it's something like they need to lower the budget. And there was this one script that I was given an example, is they had this scene that was in a restaurant, a busy restaurant with like hustle and bustle, waiters and other people, like people eating and all this stuff going on in the restaurant. And I'm like, well, this scene is very expensive to film. You're gonna have to pay for everything here. And in the scene, all that's going on is this character tells this character something that they need to know. And like you could film that at the valet station outside of the restaurant, or even in the parking lot where
Oh,
they're
right.
gonna go into the restaurant or something like that. And that way we rewrote it so it took place in the parking lot and cut out thousands and thousands of dollars of expenses for that script there. But I was going to say with my screenwriting workshop, I'm known, people have called me Simon Cowell, and
Oh, I don't know.
somebody
I guess
else
that's good.
called me a formatting Nazi,
Uh-huh.
um, because I get very picky, and some people get mad at me, and because they think I'm being too picky about their script. I'm like, if you think I'm picky or if I'm mean about your screenplay, good luck trying to get it into the hands of people who are valid and have years and years of experience, like John Callie. And they're not going to read your script. They're not. So you
Right.
better sharpen this up. And we're here to help you. My workshop is everybody's helping each other. Like all the writers are reading each other's screenplays and giving each other advice of how to clear it up. And you're supposed to study the 3 books that in my workshop. It's my book, Screenwriting Tribe Workshop Handbook, and then the Screenwriter's Bible by David Trottier, and the other book by David Trottier, Dr. Format Tells All. Those are the 3 books. And I tell writers to also pick 3 books about TV writing and read 3 books about TV writing. And then also watch YouTube videos about different things about film, like editing and camera work and directing, and look up interviews of other successful writers on YouTube and stuff like that. And one thing you shouldn't do is look at a Tarantino script and try to write like that. Tarantino
Oh
is
God.
super,
Yeah. No.
yeah.
I get that. I totally get that. Yeah.
Well, he's
That
super, his films get financed. He could write any way he wants, and he does, which is fine, and it works well for him. But you don't pick out a Tarantino script and write like he does, because he's not writing a spec script. He's writing a script for himself, and it's already financed, and he gets the actors he wants, and it's all like so. And there's other writer, producer, directors like that who you don't want to look at their scripts and think that's the way to write a script. And don't write like that and come to my workshop and think that I'm not going to say something about it.
I
And
see.
there was like somebody recently was going through my workshop, and the script they were bringing in was super sloppy. And every week she came back with more pages, and it was sloppy, sloppy, sloppy. And we would give her feedback, and then she would come back the next time with another set of pages. We do 12 pages at a time. And they were still filled with mistakes that we had already corrected her on. And finally, I'm like, I don't know what's going on. You're not studying the books, are you? And she said no, which is the right answer, because like I'm the guy who wrote the book. So don't come into my workshop with a screenplay and tell me that you read my book and you applied it to your script, because you haven't. But she dropped out. And if she doesn't want to hear what's really going to help her, there's nothing we can do about it. But there's other writers they're really sharp. And one of our big success stories is Glenise Mullins. She's a writer in Hollywood. She went to my workshop for a couple of years. She workshopped a couple scripts, and then she got on as one of the writers on Lord of the Rings,
Never
the,
heard of it.
the
Lord
series,
of the what?
the most expensive TV show ever made.
Oh,
But
that one.
yeah,
Oh, that. Yeah.
she
Yeah.
went to my workshop for 2 years before she got that, and that was her first job.
Wow.
So she
That's
went from my
fantastic. That's
workshop
amazing.
to Lord of the Rings, and now
That's
she's on.
amazing. Well,
Yeah,
and those are the kind of scripts that I'm always really curious about, because there's a lot of time with no dialogue. So, and I always wonder, how much of that is the writer and how much of that is the writer, producer, directors to get, how much of that is on the page, I guess.
well, when you're on a TV series, you got to write the way the showrunner, the executive producer, wants the scripts to be written. So they have their own styles.
Hmm.
So,
And do
and
they
in
still
my
use a Bible? When I
the
was
Screenwriter's Bible.
No, I mean for the show. There used to be show
Oh,
Bibles
yeah,
back in
there's
the
the
day.
show Bible where
Yeah.
they keep records of everything that's in the screenplay. Like in episode 3, we find out that one of the characters' fathers died. So that would be a note that would be in the show Bible. So the writers have to be familiar with all the different facts of the series that are in the show Bible, because when they're writing scripts, they can't have like episode 9 where suddenly her father comes to visit because her father died in episode 3 and stuff like that. So yeah, they keep a show Bible. and for each show. And the longer the show goes on and on and on, they also might develop their own way of different ways they like their screenplays written. And then if you are working on one of those shows, you have to adjust your writing to what the showrunner or executive producer, who's usually the same person, but not always, likes the scripts written. But then you might go work for another show. So then you have to adopt your writing style to that showrunner's.
Oh, then you have to change it up. I think because
Yeah.
when I recently rewatched Breaking Bad, and I would always get excited when it was the creator wrote and direct the episode, but it didn't really matter that much. Not like the other episodes weren't also good, but you
Yeah,
definitely, I could
usually.
tell, like especially with the direction, the difference. You know.
Oh yeah, they also the shows usually there's like a writer's room for each show, and usually
Hmm.
there's like several writers who write every episode. Or you might like be one of the writers might be assigned to write an episode. They write it, but then all the other writers and the showrunner go through it, and then they like alter it before production. So but that writer gets the credit for that episode, even though it's the whole team that rewrote it and adjusted it before it
Oh,
got.
yeah, that's really interesting because I've always wondered about that. If how they pick which of the writers is going to be on an episode, like which name is going to show up for that episode. That's
There's that. And
yeah.
then there's situations where some people don't want to be on, they don't want to be a show. They don't want to be staffed, which is the term for being one of the writers on a TV series. Or they want to just to get the experience to learn how to make their own show. Or there's situations where some people they get staffed, but they realize they feel like they're being controlled too much and they're not able to express their creativity enough, and they want to write and direct their own material, like Mike White, who directed White Lotus, I think it's called, that TV series. But he was a staff writer on a TV show, and he ended up writing his own script for a movie. He made a really low budget movie, and that's how he broke into film. And then he also made another, I forgot the name of that movie. And then it's about a guy who has a crush on a guy, but I don't remember what it was called. And then he wrote another movie called The Good Girl, and that was a really low budget movie, but it starred Jennifer Aniston and Jake Gyllenhaal. And but that's how Mike White, he was working as a staffed writer on a TV show, but also writing his own movie scripts and eventually started making them and broke away from being like an employed staff writer, and now he's an executive producer on TV shows and stuff like that.
He must work a lot. He must have spent a lot of time writing.
Yeah,
Um,
he's written
yeah.
Mike White. You can look him up on imdb.com. He actually lives kind of near me. I've seen him
Hmm.
walking his dog. I if I see him again, I'll say hi to him. But yeah, he's super mega successful now.
And how much? I always ask writers this: how long does it take you to write? Like, how long did it take you to write the Screenwriter's Bible?
Oh,
And how
I wrote this.
the tribe? I mean, the tribe. I'm sorry.
The
The
Screenwriter's Bible is written by David Trottier, but
that's a
David
different one.
Trottier endorsed my book, and that's why this his quotation is on the front cover. Um, but I I mean, it's notes that I was taking for myself for like 15 years, and then I started like, oh, this could be a book. And then I started the workshop, and I got really more serious about turning it into a book for the workshop members.
Hmm.
It was on Amazon, and other people started buying it. And then when I first got a message from the University of Philadelphia, I think was the first one that contacted me, said, we're going to use this as a textbook for our film school. And so that's why I rewrote it. But I mean, if you ask me how long it took me to write it, I don't really know, because it was like kind of like vague over like 15, 17 years before this version got published. Um, yeah, but yeah, it's an unusual book. So
So you've also written more recently, changed your writing and wrote, I don't know about change, but you decided to write two more books. And I have them here because I got to peruse them before the show. Dream Another Dream and Dream Your World. Oh,
Yeah.
they're backwards because I have up my
No, I see
thing
it. I
mirror. Oh,
see
you
it.
see it right?
I see
Okay.
it correctly.
Excellent.
Does it look
Uh,
backwards?
no, yours does. It doesn't. Looks better
On
on
my
your
screen, it
screen.
looks
Yeah.
backwards, but it's
Yeah. Okay.
not.
So it works out. Anyway, those two books are a bit of a departure, but they seem like, to me, what reading through them, for one, I really like the style. I've always liked this style. You use a lot of quotes. And not only do I
Editorial.
like quotes in a book, but there's a lot of quotes that I've never heard. You know, there's some that I have read. There's a lot by different people that I haven't heard of. So I like that style. And it's almost
Editorial.
like it still reads like a textbook, especially since you have a massive index in the back. But it's like a textbook for life almost. Is that how you thought of it when you wrote those?
I didn't think I was going to write these books. Well, the reason I started writing them is I started collecting quotations when I was a teenager. I was just weird. And nobody, that's so dark, but I grew up in a house where nobody spoke to me and I was the
Oh yeah,
last.
I know
Yeah.
there's a lot of history here. This is so
Yeah. I was in a very, very, very dark, screwed up household. And when I was 4, it started, there was a big change. We were this Irish American family in Ohio, in Cleveland, and it was the Kennedy, I mean, just after the Kennedy years or something like that. But my parents were having all their children, and they were Catholic. And when we were fine. My mother actually made money singing for weddings and funerals, so she had her own money, and we weren't rich at all, but like there was money coming in from her, and then there was money coming in from my father was getting in the real estate agent, and he was an insurance salesperson, and we lived in a not like nice but a better part of Cleveland and on the far west side. And when I was we had by then we had 8 children, and I was the 6th boy. This is getting so dark, but when I was 4,
that's okay. I mean,
yeah, here we go.
it's the life story. It's a story.
If anybody has some triggering, whatever that word is, um, I should say, when I was 4, my father was driving drunk at night and got in a car accident and went through the windshield, and his head hit the utility pole that he crashed into, and it cracked his skull open, and he actually lost part of his brain. And so after that, he survived. And after that, he was not this like, before that, he was this happy guy. Like the neighbors liked talking to him because he was funny. And he had 8 children, and like things were okay. He grew up really super poor as an only child. So it was cool for him to like be in this situation where he owned a house and he had 8 children, he had a wife, and he lived in a better part of Cleveland, and like he had a job and friends, and people like talked to him, and he was funny. And but after that, he was dark. I saw him maybe laugh twice when I was growing up. um he was not, before the accident, he was very playful. He would like get out on the floor and play toys with us and draw us pictures of cartoons. And but after that, he was not a happy man. And so the reason I started writing my book eventually was, I thought, what if when I had children, if I was gone, like either mentally or died or something, I would want to leave some kind of life advice for my children. And so I started writing something that I would eventually give to my child. And over the years, I just kept collecting quotations and like writing my thoughts about different things about life, and specifically to give to a child. But it turned into these it got into hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages. And I was
So,
also at the same time helping doctors and people write their books and then
uh-huh.
writing my screenwriting workshop. And yeah.
So this is, I mean, these are really your life work thus so far. You've been, it sounds like you've been working on them since you were a teenager in a sense.
Yeah, in a certain way, but I didn't know that they were going to be book. I didn't know it was going to even be two books. It's just I had so much information and I put them in these two books, but they're both about the same thickness, I think, like 400 something pages. But the way I wrote them is life advice from 1,000 people, like quotations from throughout history, from like everything, artists and scientists and writers and philosophers and like poets and like singers and famous people and everything from like some politicians, even though I try to stay away from them, but because who wants to listen to politicians? But yeah, so I mixed their quotations in. I didn't want it to be just my opinion. I wanted it to be the opinion of like 1,000 people about life. And so I wrote and wrote and wrote, and over the years and years and years, I'm like, oh, these are books. And so during the pandemic, I had time to finish them. And that's what I was doing while everybody was staring at TV and making bread. I was like writing. The pandemic that's a whole other story. But so I finished them and I put them out. Dream Another Dream came out last summer in 2022. And Dream Your World just came out this year, 2023. So yeah, it's life advice from 1,000 people from throughout history.
So I know you had a really hard upbringing. I mean, you touched on it a little bit, and you said you shared in the book that you sent me, the little book about yourself that you sent me, the information that you also had a hard time as a teenager. Was there any certain point that you can point to that kind of turned you around to realizing it was, if changes were going to be made, it was up to you, or you needed to change your thoughts if you were going to better yourself, or was there any certain point, or was it over a longer amount of time? I mean, you also became started doing yoga and riding. Oh, I didn't even ask about that. You said you rode your bicycle up the coast, the Pacific coast, down the coast. So
yeah.
where did you go?
A girlfriend I had moved up to Sausalito,
Uh-huh.
and went up there with friends. Were driving from here to there, and I was friends with her, and she's like, come on up. And I had already been there a few times, and I helped her move up there, but she was with somebody else. And then, so my friends from here are driving up the coast and they had a van, and I'm like, hey, do you mind if I go with you and bring my bike? And, we could stay at my ex-girlfriend's place. And then, so I went up there, and then when I got there, I just stayed there for a couple weeks, I think. And I was just biking all over the place. And then my goal was, to ride down the coast. And I eventually did it. And there's campgrounds on the beaches. And so I was doing that. And it took me 8 nights, and it was great. It was like a great mind-body challenge and freeing, and being on your bike all day and just meeting people and camping out at night. And it was that was awesome. But that was interesting because I wasn't supposed to be able to bike or walk, or I had a back injury. The first happened when I was 16, when one of my brothers punched me in the back really hard. But by the time I was in my early 30s, there was a point where my legs gave out, and they said that I'm on a roller coaster. This is dark.
Yeah, well,
But,
I've had unexplained back problems, and I know lots of people have trouble with their back. So, yeah.
Well, they told me that I would never be able to bike. I would never walk without a cane. I would never run. I would never and I just didn't accept that. And I pissed off all the doctors in the insurance plan. There were 7 doctors, and I just kept, one would I'm not seeing this patient anymore, and I have to go to another doctor in the plan. And then the insurance company called me one day, and they said No, none of the doctors want to see you. They had 7 doctors in the plan. They're like, you could pick another doctor outside of the plan and let us know which one you want to go to, and we'll cover that. And so I called um, Wayne Gretzky's doctor because Wayne Gretzky was in the news for his back injury.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, then he was playing hockey again because they said he would never play hockey, but he's playing hockey again. So I'm like, who was his doctor? So I called the hockey team and I asked them, who's Wayne Gretzky's doctor? So I called him and when ended up going to him, and all the other doctors said I needed my back fused with iron rods put in, and I'm like, I'm not going to do that, and that's one reason they got mad at me. And this doctor, Dr. Dillon, told me that I should be really glad I didn't do that. And he put me through some really intensive physical therapy. Sometimes there would be like 3 people bending and pulling me and massaging me and stuff. And I'd have to do all these exercises that were really painful. But eventually I was able to walk and run and bike, and I still do. And so that's how that happened. And I got into doing yoga, and which is a really good thing to do. I like vinyasa flow. There's all sorts of yoga that I don't like, but I like the workout of vinyasa flow yoga.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of different kinds of yoga.
But
And and is that
yeah,
also when you went to a vegan diet, or were you already vegan then?
that was also right before the back injury. I didn't know. See, my parents never took me to doctors because um, maybe one reason is this is how dark it'd go. If you're an abused child, if you abuse your child, you don't want to take your child to a doctor.
Oh, yeah.
They
Yeah.
might talk and they
My
might,
parents didn't take me to doctors because you just didn't do that when I was growing up.
yeah.
Unless my arm was broken. We didn't go to
Oh,
doctors much.
yeah.
Yeah.
There were ulterior motives of like, don't. But I
Right.
didn't
Right.
know when I was growing up why I was in so much pain if somebody bumped into me. And I thought other people were also in pain, but I was wimpy. And I was like, but I wasn't weak. I was like a strong kid. I would bike, and always had a garden. I was mowing lawn and shoveling snow and raking leaves for the neighbors to make money. But um, I, yeah, I didn't know until I was in my early 20s that I was born with a genetic kidney disorder. And I started being in pain when I was like permanent pain when I was a teenager, like this little gentle irritating pain in my kidneys, and I didn't know what it was, but I didn't even know it was my kidneys. But when I was in my early 20s, I found out that I had kidney disease, and sometimes a southern accent kicks out. But
Hmm.
I lived in Tennessee for a little while. But so I by the time I was in my late 20s, I just was getting worse and worse and worse. And they told me I needed a kidney transplant, and I didn't want to do that. Like, you have to. I'm like, I don't have to do anything. The doctors got mad at me there for being, I was like this just disagreeable patient. And so this one doctor told me that the only thing he sees work is if you cut out all animal protein. And I didn't even know what that meant. So
You, what does that mean? What are you talking
what?
about?
And
That's
he was like
crazy.
vegetarianism, but it's more than vegetarianism. And so I started just eating like
Oh,
rice and beans and stuff. But there was a point where in November of 1990, yeah, November 1990, I was in the hospital and they kind of gave up on me. I signed the thing where like don't resuscitate.
the do not resuscitate order.
Just
Yeah. Yeah.
don't give me a kidney transplant. I don't know why, but I just felt like that wasn't for me. And so in according to doctors, they said I died. I was supposed to be in the hospital for like half a day, and I ended up in there like 5, 6 days. But on the sixth morning, um apparently the doctors thought I died, and this nurse, it was toward the like 6 in the morning or something, and the doctor told the nurse who was on staff, like, don't deal with it, just let the other nurse take care of it. So the other nurse came in, she was going to prep my body to go to the morgue.
Oh
And I'm,
man.
I'm laughing.
Oh
It's so dark, but
jeez.
it's so. But so she saw my eyes move, and so after that, I thought maybe I should try what this other doc that to tell how I got home was it took me yeah, but I got home and I was like, I'm gonna try what this doctor said and just eat fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds.
Hmm. So
I
you
started
had died
feeling
of kidney disease. That would have been the cause of death when you're
yeah, I
yeah,
guess kidney failure.
kidney failure.
Well,
Wow.
your kidneys filter your blood, and there's like everything you get out of order, like your minerals, your calcium, like your blood, your electrolytes, and I don't know how it works, but so I started feeling really good after just eating fruits and nuts and vegetables and no milk, no dairy, no meat, no eggs, no anything. But and then yeah, I had all this energy and I didn't know what to do with myself. I'd like go biking and biking and biking and biking. But then I injured my back and they're like, no more biking. And but after my experience with the kidney doctors telling me to get a kidney transplant, and I said no, and I got better. Then there are these other doctors are telling me you need to have your spine fused and have poles put in your back and rods. And I felt the same way, like that's not for me. And I didn't follow their advice, and I got better. So yeah,
That's actually good. I mean, I know it sounds dark, the reasons it's happened, but it ended up good. And I mean, it ended up well. You feel good now, right? And you haven't had rods put in your back, which is a lifelong
no,
struggle. I mean, that doesn't, you don't even know if that's going to work. For one,
yeah.
they recommended my wife have that done like 20 years ago, and she's never had it done. Yeah, and it's
Well,
the
one of the
same.
reasons
Yeah.
is I didn't have it done. Also, I didn't like when they said that to me. No, you're not operating on my back. Is when I was 19. When I moved. By then, I was living in California, and there was this boy who I went to high school with who called me when I was living in California, saying, "Is here." I'm like, you're here for what? And he said, "Is he was here because he's got to box up his mother's apartment." His mother had had back surgery and was left in so much pain that she committed suicide.
Oh no.
And so when they were telling me
Yeah.
that I needed to have back surgery, I'm like, no, I'm not. No, they're like you have to. I'm like, I do not have to.
No, you don't have to do anything. Don't have to do anything you don't want to do. That
And I still, decades later, I run and jog and bike and do yoga and swim, and I don't have back pain.
that's awesome. That is fantastic. And so you just finished these two books in the last what 2.5 years? That's
These Dream Another Dream and Dream Your World. Yeah, Dream Another Dream last year and Dream Your World this year.
that seems really fast. I mean, I know you said you had been collecting quotes, but
No, I've been working on them for years and years and years. There was
oh,
several years
okay.
ago when, I mean, more than several years ago when I realized, oh, these are books. And so I eventually, during the pandemic is when I had time to finish them the way I
And
wanted them finished.
so do you sit down every day and have a writing schedule where I'm going to
No.
write? No.
Um,
Uh,
my life is so weird. But during the pandemic, I was alone.
mhm.
And I, so I would go by, and I don't like being inside. I'm outside all the time, like somewhere else. But I would take my laptop and I would bike somewhere and I'd go write in a park or by the beach and stuff like that, or a hiking trail and write. Or all the parks in Santa Monica and certain parts of LA have free Wi-Fi, so you could write and research stuff in the park or in the on the beach. The Santa Monica Pier has free Wi-Fi, so you could hang out on the pier and write.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
That's a huge advantage.
there's beach parks that have free Wi-Fi and sit at a picnic table and beneath trees and write. So I do that a lot. And that's what I was doing during the pandemic, biking and writing and jogging and doing workouts on the sand and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But um yeah.
So you're still your main focus or your main thing that you do is the writer's workshop? Is it
My writer's
or
workshop, that's on Sundays. I organize that. Plus, I edit scripts for people. And sometimes it's writers, but I'm really picky about which writers I work with because I'm not good for every script, especially for every story. And, sometimes I refer them to somebody else a
oh,
lot.
I see.
And
It
then,
always seemed like that would take a ton of patience to edit anything. Uh,
yeah,
but yeah.
yeah. And then sometimes some producer will want me to edit their script. And I've been doing a lot of podcasts lately, promote my books.
Hmm.
I'm writing another book. I forgot about the plant-based nutrition book when you started mentioning it. I'm like, yeah, I wrote that too. I forgot.
You did. You wrote.
I know. I'm like, oh, yeah, I wrote that book too. And that's 400 pages. And because I had learned so much about nutrition, um, helping doctors research and write their books and nutritionists. And I learned so much that I took a bunch of notes and I'm like, I could write a better book than they're writing. And was my thought. And so I also am working on another book, but I don't want to say what it is yet. I don't
Oh,
like
okay.
saying what I'm working on
It's gonna be one of my
specifically
questions.
because it's better when I just say when it's finished, because that way, like even when I was writing these books, people didn't know. And I came out with them like, what? I didn't know you were writing a book. I'm like, yeah, don't talk about it. Exactly what I'm writing until I'm done. Because I think it kind of disperses energy
Hmm.
that you
Oh,
should be
okay.
putting into your book. And you also I don't want to hear people's opinion. Like, oh, you're writing about that. Well, you should write about this and put this chapter in. I'm like, no, I don't want to hear anybody's opinion about what I should write. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah, so I don't tell people what I'm writing until after I'm done.
That totally makes sense. Absolutely. Excuse me. I'm losing my losing my voice. The only I used to when I started doing these, I did them in my studio, and hopefully I'll get back to that at some point.
I
Um,
should tell you something.
Go ahead.
During the pandemic, I also had kidney surgery
Oh my gosh!
to fix something that they couldn't
Wow.
fix years ago because they had developed all this new technology.
Uh huh.
So in 2021, I had kidney surgery again. And then I almost died of heart failure.
Oh my gosh!
They
Oh
spent like
no.
more than a
That's
day trying to keep me alive. But like a week before I had the kidney surgery, I had vocal cord surgery and I couldn't talk for like 3 months.
and this was all during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Now, I wonder you were kind of shy about saying what was going on during the pandemic. Wow.
God, that
Wow.
was,
So you had to negotiate all of this medical minutia during a time when no one wanted you to go to the hospital. Basically, no one wanted to
yeah,
see
during
you.
the pandemic, I had
Yeah.
surgery and vocal cord surgery. And then like not talking was weird. And I had this app on my phone. I was at a store and I saw this guy who wasn't talking and he was like typing in his phone and showing it to the cashier. And I'm like, I asked him like, what is that? He said it's big. Because I told him I'm getting ready to have vocal cord surgery. It's an app called Big, B-I-G.
Hmm.
And you could type in big words show up on your screen so you could talk to people that way. Well, I was using that when I couldn't talk and I had to go to like the Apple store, to the grocery store or something. And I would type what I needed to say. And a lot of people think that if you can't speak, if you're mute, you can't hear because they start talking to you really loudly. I'm like, I can hear you fine. It's my voice.
That is
And they'd be like,
it's
oh,
it's such a natural thing. I don't know why for people to start. It's the same when someone doesn't speak the language. And we tend
yeah.
to, yell at them like that's going to help. If we speak louder and slower, suddenly
Yeah.
they speak English.
And surprisingly, every time I had to go to the Apple store because my computer broke and I brought it in for repairs. And every time I had to go in there, I dealt with someone else. And every single person I dealt with there would talk to me really loud and I would have to tell each one. And there was this one guy who I went in and he stops and he's typing and he's typing and he's typing and and I typed like, what are you doing? And I showed it like, it's like, I'm writing you a message. I'm like, I'm like, I could hear
You're
you.
right here. I could.
I don't need to read your message on your
Oh my
phone.
God.
But I mean, I had to type that in and tell him, and he was like all confused. He was almost like embarrassed and almost like I pissed him off because I embarrassed him. Like I made a fool of him, but I didn't do anything. I'm like standing there waiting for him to talk to me. Anyway.
And that was for 3 months, you said?
Yeah. It
3
lasted
months you
longer.
couldn't talk?
They first said 2 months,
Uh-huh.
but it went on and on and on. And I went in finally for a second opinion to this other doctor. And she's like, no, they shouldn't have told you it was only going to be 2 months. Sometimes it could last 6 months. I'm like,
Oh no.
what?
I used to work with someone who would go to quiet camp where they would go and, meditate and stuff for a week or more. So you saved a lot of money there.
Yeah,
I can't imagine. That's got to be really hard, especially in LA, actually. In a big city, it's even tougher.
well, it was the pandemic, so I wasn't around people anyway. But
Oh,
I
right.
did. Oh, and then the workshop, I still ran it, but there were other writers who would run it for me, and I would just be there on Zoom, and I would give type in my feedback to the writers, or email it to them, or I just have to answer this quick text. Their answer.
Okay, not a problem.
Oh, okay,
But,
yeah.
all right.
Sorry.
Well,
Okay.
you have a lot that's happened in your lifetime and a lot that's happened with your writing. We could probably talk for a lot longer, but I know you've got other things to do. So I probably should wrap it up here. It's really been great having you on the podcast. This is I'm trying to switch things up on my background, but it really doesn't matter. So I'm going to
Thank
ignore
you, though,
that.
because
But
this has been fun. I can't believe we've been talking that long already.
that's
But yeah,
my
books
favorite
are
thing
on,
to hear.
my books are on Amazon, and mostly get feedback from men. My
Interesting.
Dream Another Dream. There's a lot of stuff about child abuse
Hmm.
issues. It's amazing some of the stuff I've been told by men. I think it's underreported a lot, and 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 assumed that girls are abused more. Maybe they are. I don't know. But I think there's a lot more male boy abuse going on than people want to think about. Probably, it's
I
way
think
more.
that, yeah, that seems that makes sense because males, especially young males. I mean,
Yeah,
females, it's the same. It's also underreported, but males even more so. That's not supposed to happen to you, and
yeah, you're
it's
manly.
very,
You don't want
yeah,
to
it's
admit that somebody did something to you, that you were
yeah,
that you could have but you're a child. You're thinking as a child. You're dealing with life as a child. You can't deal with certain things, especially if they're being done to you by adults,
yeah.
especially if they're being done to you by adults who you're supposed to be trust more than anybody else in the world, and they're doing things to you. And yeah, there's a lot of I think there's a lot of underreporting on male child abuse of all sorts.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And if people want the book is on Amazon. Is there anywhere? Well, you can send me some any information about maybe your workshop and other stuff you want me to put in the show notes. We'll put it on in there. We'll include it all. So thanks again. Thanks for being on. And I'll just say you've been listening to Were You Still Talking? This is Joel Albrecht, and my guest today has been Daniel John Carey. His latest books, Dream Your World and Dream Another Dream, are available now, as well as his book about veganism, his screenwriter's book. A lot of stuff was covered today. Thanks so much for coming in. Hope you enjoyed the show. Remember to share it and maybe follow the show. I don't know, anything you want to do. Thanks for listening. Thank you very much, and thanks for being on once again.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. As I always say, be good to yourself.